Wow. Sound of Freedom is going to be a movie that is difficult to review. Not because it's a bad movie, but because of the subject matter that it is about. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the numbers. Obviously, the title says that it embarrasses Indiana Jones, and it does. I get what you're thinking. This is nothing more than another Indiana Jones box office update wrapped around a review, and you wouldn't necessarily be wrong. And who doesn't like a good David and Goliath story? Apparently The Guardian. Now, on its opening day, which was July 4th of 2023, The Sound of Freedom brought in $14 million, which is pretty respectable for a small film that practically no one ever heard of. And there's other factors we need to look at, like the number of theaters that this opened into, which is only 2,634. Which is nearly half of what we saw with Indy 5. Indiana Jones opened up with $7 million and was in 4,500 theaters. And Sound of Freedom opened up with a little bit more than half of what Indy had. And when you compare it not just to the opening days, if you compare it to the 4th of July take, it still blew Indiana Jones out of the water. And again, I know a lot of people want to say, oh, this is, you're cherry picking numbers. We're really not, because it's right here in the numbers. And yes, Indiana Jones opened a few days earlier, but still, this is Indiana Jones. This should be raking in tons of money, which it is not. So if we go and take a look at something like Crystal Skull, the numbers tell you a completely different story. Crystal Skull on its following Monday made $26 million, which is more than twice Dial of Denial has made. Now, considering that an independent film that literally came out of nowhere just knocked the socks off of Indy 5 is embarrassing. And sure, it's just one day, but it is the 4th of July, and that would be a prime day to go see Indy 5, and not as many people saw it. And on top of that, it was in less theaters than Dial of Denial. Anyway, now that I have the numbers out of the way, I can talk about the film, but before I do that, I want to warn you, there are certain words I just have to dance around, like Fredo and child traffic stops. Mainly because if I don't change the words, it's not advertiser friendly. And if it's not advertiser friendly, it gets shoved down the memory hole and you won't find the video, which is a problem. Sound of Freedom is a movie that is based on a true story, and like most things that come out of Hollywood, it's loosely based on a true story. Now, there are certain events that do happen, and Tim Ballard is a real person, but this is a movie, and in order to make a movie engaging, certain things have to be embellished a bit. And this film is no different, I can assure you. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure where to start with this film because there's a lot to talk about and it is a very difficult subject to tackle. The movie starts off with clips of CCTV footage of children being kidnapped, and it really sets the tone for this movie, and it is very difficult to watch because it's real. The opening scene takes place in Honduras, where a talent scout shows up hearing a young girl singing, and she goes and talks to the father and convinces him to take his two children to this talent agency where they could potentially get modeling and acting gigs, but it is really a front for child traffic stops. And this opening scene is the framework for the rest of the film, because Tim Ballard, after going and busting a Fredo, is asked by his partner, are they truly making a difference? What about the children? Yes, they've busted the Fredos, but there's still these innocent victims out there that are not being recovered by DHS, which leads him to make a deal with the Fredo, well, at least tricking him into making a deal and convincing him that he is actually on his side when he in reality is not. And he does this because he wants to go and save a child from one of the traffic stoppers, which ultimately leads him to rescuing the child who was kidnapped at the very beginning of the film. His name is Miguel, and Miguel has his sister who is still out there. And the rest of the movie is about him trying to go and rescue the sister. Now, there are some things in the movie that are based on real events, such as the sting operation that they set up in Colombia. And there's footage of the raid that they play at the end of the film. Now, before I get into my thoughts, I want to point out the fact that my expectations were not properly managed with this film, because everything I read about it said it was an action film, which this movie is not, and that's fine. Because I was expecting to see a movie about Fredos and human traffic stoppers getting blown away, and that wasn't the case. I blame the marketing more than anything, along with the various websites that talked about the film. It is more of a drama thriller than anything else, and like I said, that's fine. It's just that my expectations were a little bit different when I walked into the theater. Yes, there is some action, but it's few and far between, and mostly towards the end of the film. Overall, I would consider this movie to be a dead average drama thriller, which is not necessarily a bad thing in the day and age of intersectionality in film. I would rather watch this movie over Indiana Jones or The Flash any day. One of the major highlights of the film is the acting. It is phenomenally done, and the kids just knock it out of the park. And one of the best parts is the speech by Bill Camp's character, Vampiro, where he talks about why he got into rescuing children in the darkness that it put him in when he discovered something. I don't want to ruin it because I want you to go and experience this movie for yourself. It is really, really well done. My only real criticism of the movie is the fact that, well, there's a couple areas where they try and build up tension, and I don't think they pulled off as well as they could have. But overall, like I said, this is a very average middle-of-the-road film, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is like what we used to get before Hollywood went crazy. Despite the fact that this is a very difficult movie to watch, I would rather watch this over something like The Flash or Indiana Jones or some other junk big blockbuster film that is just complete trash. I want to point out that this movie is not something I would classify as being entertaining, mainly because of the subject matter. That doesn't mean that the movie is not good, though. Take a look at Leaving Las Vegas, which I think is probably one of the best films ever done by Nick Cage, but that is not an enjoyable film to watch. It is rather painful and difficult, and quite frankly, a film I would never, ever watch again. And that's mainly because of the emotional impact that the film leaves you with. It is a depressing and dour film, and it nails it on all marks. And this film is no different. There is definitely emotional impact in it, and it does leave you feeling two things. The first one being hope, the fact that there is somebody out there trying to make a difference in stopping child traffic stops. And the second one being there's some very bad people in this world where I want to see very bad things happen to them. Another thing too that this movie shows you is you can make a smaller budget film. This thing was done under $20 million. I want to say it was like 14.5, and still make a very good film. Just look at the overinflated budget of Dial of Dysentery and just how awful of a film it was. It didn't need to be a $300 million film. They could have toned it down to maybe 100 or 150. Now, granted, that wouldn't make the film good, because if the script is garbage, the movie is still going to be garbage. If Hollywood wants to go and succeed again, it needs to go and tone down the ideological nonsense and go and shrink those budgets as well, because if they want to make money, they need to cost less, which is kind of a no-brainer, you would think. Not every movie needs to be epic and grandiose, it just needs to tell a good story. And that's what will bring audiences back to the theater. Anyway, that's my take on it. What are your thoughts? Leave a comment. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this movie. Are you planning on seeing it? Are you not? Let me know why. If you enjoyed this video, there should be something right around right here. You can go check it out. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.